Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great start to their week. I know it's Wednesday, so happy hump day for everyone who celebrates hump day, but almost there. So if you're new here, we like to explain why we offer opportunities such as Leadership Live, and that is to multiply our blessing. And at Rosewood, our why is to multiply our blessing and opportunities that have been put onto our trust. And allowing our employees to better themselves through Leadership Live is one of many ways we achieve this purpose. So last month we wrapped up Q2 creating a great team, and we had over 200 participants who joined in those 3 July, August, September sessions. Those who joined should receive their pins this morning. I just walked through the office, gave those out, and Claire, she received the other ones, so she's going to mail out to the remote employees. So congrats to everybody who completed the Q3 Leadership Live, and for Q3. And we had a lot of participants who had 2 of the 3 sessions. I know there's a lot of traveling within those months. So if you don't know which ones you've missed, please reach out to marketing and we can send those over to you and update you on which ones you have missed. And you can just email back marketing. There's a question at the end of each video. And once you get everything updated, you can just send it over to marketing and we can get you on the participation list and get you a pin and get you going for that end of the year celebration for Leadership Live. So for Q4, we're discussing overcoming obstacles. There'll be no changes to our point system. So we're close to finishing up. We've got 3 more left, and here to kick us off on this Leadership Live is Dr. G, or Dr. Guy. Can't pronounce your last name, Dr. G, so I apologize, but he has earned his bachelor's degree in psychology, his master's and doctorate in psychology as well. He's a professor and chair of psychology department, or was a professor and chair of psychology department at WVU Tech for 12 years and served as the Tech University strategic planning coordinator for 2 years. For 3 years and for 4 years, he was the academic dean of Teles Valley campus. And so, without further ado, Dr. G, welcome to the call.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, let's go into it. Importance of workplace culture. And don't want to just move on to the next slide. This gives you an idea of what we're going to be talking about. Don't worry, it's not going to be a marathon session, but we'll be starting broadly. Looking at organizational culture, we'll be looking at some ideas of cultural values, then we'll be getting narrower and narrower, and then we're going to be getting more concrete, more specific and focused, looking at workplace culture and your own experiences with workplace culture and ideas to how to measure whether it's working and ways to improve it. So let's move on. So the idea of organizational culture is that it's often unwritten. It can be written, but it's often values or unstated values, their attitudes, their behaviors, their values and ideas that people bring into the workplace and that they live inside the workplace. The social environment, sometimes it's called the soul. The dress code is an example of culture. Values and assumptions about what time you should come into work, what time you can go home from work. Sometimes that's stated in writing. In other cultures, in other organizational cultures, it's not. So it's not necessarily the mission statement of an organization because that's in writing. So culture are the values and expectations that guide the mission statement and guide the work of the entire organization. Let's move on. So one that I like to talk about to kind of broaden and help us wrap our arms around this idea of culture is the idea of time. And so especially in American traditional Western organizational cultures that are very forward thinking, they focus on the future, they focus on what's next. There's a strategic plan. Everyone has a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, SWOT analyses. So it's a very forward focused way of thinking. But that's not the only way to do it. There are lots of places, lots of organizations that focus on the present or even on the past, and they are successful. One example could be Amish people have a reputation for remarkable workmanship, remarkable house building, carpentry. They are a very traditional culture, and they're focused on the here and on the now. Maybe they do have a 5-year strategic plan. I'm not Amish myself. I do have some Quaker in my DNA, but the idea is that you don't have to be focused on the future. You can be focused on the present and on an enormous focus on quality and precision and living in the moment. And that is a successful organizational culture in many companies throughout the world and many NGOs as well. How well you get along with other people, is it affiliation? Most people, most humans, I'll speak as a psychologist, we need to feel connected to other people, even in the workplace. And that matters. How your relationships and how you feel about your teammates, your coworkers, has an enormous impact on how you feel about your job and how you perform in your job. And again, dress code is another example of that. And again, some of these things may be spoken and stated in writing, and some of them may not. Let's move on. And so to really kind of blow your mind, talk about super big picture. This is a traditional approach in industrial psychology to look at organizational culture as an open system. And when you look at this, there's about 100 billion different items listed in this chart. The idea is that there's a managerial system, that's the center core, that's the leadership, the tech, the equipment, or the technology that you use under technical subsystems, the goals and values subsystem, and you have culture, philosophy, overall goals, and individual goals. And we'll talk more about goals in a minute. And then the psychosocial system, so people's motivations, communication patterns, the relationships, and that all relates, of course, to the workflow. And then what are the external pressures on the organization from the marketplace, from competitors, and what are the resources, the inputs that organization has? So it's all related. The takeaway from this big this big graph, the takeaway I want you to have is that these are all overlapping. These circles overlap each other. They're all affected by the inputs. They all relate to the outputs. And they all impact each other. So there's an enormous amount of overlap. And that's why this has become such a focus about setting the tone, why that's so important in a workplace or a military unit or a church or whatever organization of people you have. You're going to have the people culture, the organizational culture. Let's move on. And from a more kind of a nuts and bolts, do we really need to talk about this touchy-feely, warm, fuzzy stuff? It makes a difference. As that prior slide shows, everything affects everything else. We know through a great deal of research that people's individual work performance is directly impacted by that culture, by all of those things that matters, even if they're not written down, if they're not stated. That the values of an organization matters. I'm really pleased to see that the Rosewood group has stated values. It's on their websites. They have it put it up everywhere. They talk about it. That many organizations just kind of fly by this, don't focus on this. It really, really makes a difference, though. We can see that how happy people are in their jobs, job satisfaction, whether people go above and beyond what's asked of them, the corporate citizenship. You can define many organizations simply by whether or not the employees go above and beyond, even when they're not asked to, even when it's not in their job description, even when they're not going to get paid or praised for it. The culture really, really, that really it makes a difference. Employee commitment, turnover. I'll be talking about turnover at the end of the talk. But some organizations are really good about this, that they, of course, you measure yourself in terms of your stock value or in terms of how many units or widgets you've produced this day or this week or this fiscal quarter. Some organizations have gotten on board with understanding they need to have routine metrics for turnover. Losing good people is brutal. So employee commitment. There are people who stay at jobs, and you all know this, because even if the pay isn't right for you, even if the job isn't the perfect fit for you, it's such a great place to be. The people are so great. You put up with the bad stuff just because of that culture. Let me throw it out to all of you, and I know we have a lot of people on the call today. Can you give me an example or give us an example? Share with us something about maybe not your current job. It could have been a former job, that something about its culture that you liked so much that it just made you happy or makes you happy. And there, of course, every job has downsides, and yet you stay in there, you like it, you keep at it. Can anyone share something that they liked about their current or a former job, about the culture that they really enjoyed or they really kind of connected with? And Antonio, I don't know if
Uh,
people can unmute themselves or not. That's your call.
they can. Yep. And
Okay.
I will mute myself first and go. I think the culture here at Rosewood. So I've been with a lot of companies where you don't really get to interact with the EMT or like the CEO or anything like that with the other companies. And this one, like the open door policy kind of that they have, the communication is very transparent, and you kind of just talk to any of the executive level and kind of feel like that you guys are equal, like your coworkers, and it's really cool that they do that here.
And so you feel connected to your leadership in some way that in other organizations you feel kind of separated from. Awesome. Other experiences, other things to share.
I'll share. This is Lori. Um, my my very first job here in North Carolina, that I moved to North Carolina for, um, it was truly a family atmosphere. I mean, the owner of that company sold it in 2003. So it's been gone a long time, but the employees from that company still get together and still act like a family after all these years. So that's really what impressed me was the ongoing friendships and family that you have from a job from a company that has not even been in existence since 2003.
That is so awesome, Lori. I like that example. I wish there was an easy way to measure that. I mean, I'm like you. I have friends, people who used to work for me, and now they're way far away, and we still keep in touch. They send me TikTok videos and such, making bread and all. And I wish there was an easy way to measure that, because to me, that kind of connection, that the sense of affiliation that I mentioned earlier, is such a profound indicator of a strong and healthy work culture. Another good example is folks in the military. They put in their time and maybe they move on and they leave the military and they move on to other things in life, but that's still a part of them and they still have those connections with each other years and decades later. That same thing with churches. I mean, I think that's a powerful, if you can get that to happen in a workplace, that's really special. Anyone else want to share an example?
I
Okay,
have an
oh
example.
yeah. Go on. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Um, when I used to work for a Spectrum at the cable company, one of the things that they used to do is because cable was free, is that they used to allow people to watch movies or play games or do stuff in the break rooms, and because they had a full cafeteria that you did have to purchase, but it was pretty reasonable prices. You did not really have to leave the building for your break time, and they had like these little quiet places where you could either take a nap or read a book or just kind of relax. So it almost kind of gave you no reason to leave the building, except coming and going to work, and that was something that was appreciative, to not have to leave during your shift.
Yeah, and what I like about your example is that it's a stated contract or anything. It's just an experience that you and coworkers can have, and it just makes it really, really nice, and it makes it special. That's a great example. I love those. Thanks for sharing, y'all. Let's move on, Antonio. Okay, and so we're getting narrower. As we talk and go on, we're getting more and more structured, a little bit more concrete, a little more narrow. So going from the broad organization down to smaller subcultures or teams in industrial psychology, we tend to call it subcultures because there's work groups, there's task forces, there's a lot of synonyms for teams, and some of these boxes here on this slide. You may have a work spouse or a work partner. That's not in writing anywhere. That's not a requirement, but you and another coworker, maybe in your unit or some other unit, you just really get along and you do have some alignments in your work responsibilities and you end up forming this work partnership, this work friendship. And maybe you see each other outside of work, maybe you don't. But certainly in the workplace or in the work setting, if it's remote, you have a partner, and so it's a work spouse. The idea of group cohesion, and again, the broader organization. If you're working for a huge mega corporation, it's going to have divisions, it's going to have units within it, and you end up forming relationships with the people closest to you, either through physical proximity or through your job tasks and your work roles. And there are a number of studies that kind of are mapping out, and we're debating among psychologists, what's the optimal number? There are some arguments that, less than 100, the human brain is wired neurologically. If you were to look at someone, let's say a 20-something, and they have all of their relationships are on social media. Maybe not Facebook anymore, but I don't know, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And you can map out someone's entire social tree pretty much on their social map. You can count. And so there's this argument about what's the optimal number, and that most humans seem to have. It's definitely below 100 of close relationships, family relationships, work relationships, and it spreads out, and it gets to a point where it gets thinner, the contact, the exposure gets thinner and thinner to a point where you can't see it anymore, and it seems to be about 100 people. But what's the optimal number for a small, cohesive team where you're finishing each other's sentences and you're thinking together, and you almost don't have to speak. It's almost telepathic. This idea of group cohesion is very organic. You can try to structure it, and the best organizations too try to structure that group cohesion. But that's a powerful indicator of group cohesion that reflects the entire organizational culture. It's hard to have good group cohesion if you have a bad organizational culture. And so I don't want to get, I don't want it to be, we had some positive stuff, so let's have some negative stuff. Does anyone want to share a time they worked, presumably before they came to their current employment under Rosewood, but let's say in some former job where the work culture wasn't that great, and so it didn't really encourage forming relationships, forming work spouses? Does anyone want to share an example of that, and more specifically, why you think that happened, or why that wasn't such a great organizational culture, didn't really encourage work relationships? Does someone want to share? Doesn't have to be nightmarish, just a mildly negative or mildly non-supportive organizational culture, some experience you've had in your past? I know I'm taking it up a notch in terms of courage. It's not such an act of bravery to talk about a positive thing. Now I'm taking it up a notch. Let's have an act of bravery to talk about something that wasn't so negative. But presumably you're in a better space. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I got you. So one situation, I've worked in HR for the last 20 years, so these will all be previous HR experiences. One experience was the HR department was 25 people, and it was just too many people. So yeah, maybe that we did have cohesion between the people that we worked with or who were right in front of our cubicles or our offices on a day-to-day basis. But as a group, when we tried to have like a Christmas party or whatever, we kind of never had that total cohesion because there's just way too many people. And we were all doing different things. It wasn't really kind of connected. So just having too many people in one group was an issue. And then on the opposite, I also had an HR department where we were all across the country. So the closest person to me in the department was about 3 hours away. So we never met. It was all, and this is before COVID, so not too much on Zoom and things like that, but it was all phone calls and emails. So it was kind of that disconnect of never really kind of connecting with those people besides, just kind of the random phone calls and stuff that we didn't really have much cohesion.
Oh, Kiana, that I hope I said that right. But that
Yes.
doing HR remotely, that's work. That there's some. I mean, the emotional labor that goes into HR. I mean, that's just part of the game. It's an occupational hazard. Trying to do that remotely when the systems aren't in place first, if it's like, especially pre-COVID, where the systems aren't really articulated, the communication paths aren't built up. I feel your pain. That's doing HR kinds of work remotely over email. Wow, that's I could see how that would be a struggle. You also spoke to the point about if the organization's too big, and on paper it may make sense. Everyone has a similar task or similar role or whatever, so it makes sense that they're all on the same team. But if it's just too big, again, we come up to this argument about how big is too big, where you can really connect and relate to people on a human level that encourages you to go that extra mile. Yeah. Thank you for your act of bravery, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyone else?
This is Treminkia. I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
A former employee, we used to have offices, basically everyone, and then we moved into a new facility and we had cubicles. And they wanted to encourage collaborative space, and so that we can all do that. However, when that happened, then people started getting write-ups for having too many conversations.
Oh. Mm. So they kind of set themselves up for failure. Am I hearing that right?
Yes.
Well, yeah, humans are going to be humans. I mean, we're social animals. And so, I mean, I love the idea of the shared space. And I know that America has kind of a love-hate, it's like a fad, like, whether bell-bottom jeans are coming in or going out or coming in or going out. And it's like, well, we all need to be working together better. So let's just push people together physically in a shared space. And then they go back to the cubicles after a decade and another decade. And so it's kind of the yin and yang there, like a yo-yo diet. And both approaches can work, obviously, but it takes a lot of forethought. It takes a lot of structure. It takes a lot of guidelines. And sounds like they were retroactively trying to fix it once they kind of created a monster. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Let's move on, Antonio. Okay. And this connects back to an earlier slide about goals. And I know that Dr. Edward Fubara, my good friend and colleague, has given a presentation on goal setting and the importance of goals. Some ways that leadership or that you can structure just with your buddies, doesn't have to be a management kind of thing, to increase cohesion or for people to get along, setting superordinate goals where you essentially it's a team goal. You have your individual performance goal, your individual evaluation, and your individual expectations that are set for you. But as a team, are there team goals that make you dependent on someone else? You can't be successful unless someone else is successful. And that's that next one of interdependent goal setting, where I need, let's say right now, my daughter just recently got certified as a professional car saleswoman. You have to go through a licensing process and everything for that. And so she might do her job great of selling the customer on a car, but she needs the finance department to have good customer service to make it happen, so that person has the financing to pay for that car. Otherwise, she doesn't get that sale. The organization doesn't get that sale. The finance people are depending on sales people to bring in customers to do the financing. They can't do their job if they don't have new customers coming in. So we end up becoming interdependent on each other. And so that next step there, reciprocity, I'll just speak briefly about this. We humans are wired for reciprocity. And what that means is kind of tit for tat. If I do you a favor, you are going to have this instinct, and this is cross-cultural, it's across gender, across race, across generation. If someone does you a favor, you're going to kind of like them a little more. You're going to feel a little indebted to them, especially if they don't have to. If they just do you a solid, you are going to feel there's a gut level human Homo sapien instinctive reaction to like that person just a little bit more and to feel a little bit indebted to that person. And so when an opportunity arises, you may do a favor back for that person, even if they didn't ask you for that favor. And if that happens in the workplace, in the church, or the military unit, or whatever, the NGO, whatever you're doing, or just your buddies, you help each other out, you feel inclined to help each other out more. What that ends up happening is corporate citizenship, where you start kicking in, putting in extra work, maybe not even so much for the organization, but to help your buddy out, to help your friend out, to help your work BFF or your work spouse out. And so you start covering for each other and helping each other, and the organization benefits, everyone benefits. And so that happens when the organization creates a structure of shared goals, of teamwork goals. And the way to do that is that last bullet there, that last box, is when the organization structures goals that are both individual but also team or group. And so there's an essence of group assessment as well as individual assessment. That all helps to contribute to a organizational value that fosters relationships with people. Let's move on to the next slide, Antonio. Okay, so how do you do this? Just with your friends, or in the future, if you have a leadership opportunity, or in your current leadership opportunities, how do you create the culture that you want? So a couple of things here. First, leadership is so very important here, to have a structured, you need to sit down and just write it down for yourself, not just the values, but what kind of culture do you want? What kind of relationships do you want your coworkers to have? Presumably you want people to have good corporate citizenship. Well, how do you encourage that? Write it down, have meetings, have planning. It matters. Leadership really matters. It has to be a formal focus. You've got to go beyond just the mission statement. Everyone does that nowadays. And we have to go beyond writing our values. That's an important step. But going beyond that, how do you think about it? How do you organize it? There needs to be metrics for this. There should be structured socialization. A lot of work in psychology looks at socialization. So when you bring in a new team member to your organization, what do you do? So let's go beyond HR. That's, the HR onboarding process, how to get their key to the office and where to park and all that kind of stuff. But the socialization of what are the values of this organization? Again, like I keep saying, a lot of it's not written down. So you absorb it like osmosis, because we're social animals. We get it from other people. We watch other people. We observe. We love to people watch. Even the introverts among us people watch. We watch each other. We watch what our leaders do. And so mentoring, a structured mentoring, not just for how to do the job, but what are the expectations and values around the job? That's so important. A lot of studies have shown that companies and organizations, churches that have a structured mentor plan, doesn't have to be permanent, but just to bring in a new person for those socialization, to learn to absorb that culture. You need to be careful about who you choose as your mentors. Older people with more seniority, they could be great mentors. They could say, look, here's what's written. Here's what you got to do, but between you and me, you've really got to do this other thing as well. And it's not written down, but believe me, the bosses look for that, or whatever the conversation may be. So we know that in every organization, there are unwritten rules. Well, who's sharing those unwritten rules? You need to figure that out. You need to get that, really write it down and create a process, a structured process for doing that. There needs to be really a focus. And I am leaning on leaders here. Leaders really need to set the tone. If you don't, then individual staff members will create their own culture based on their environment. Kind of like what we heard earlier about people being thrust together in work pods and, kind of shared workspace. If there isn't a structure there, people are just going to make up their own culture. And it's really not fair to write up people for creating culture. That's what we do. We are culture agents. And if there isn't a structure around it, if leadership really isn't on top of it, it's just going to kind of emerge on its own. So I have this little TikTok video. I'm very hip and cool, by the way. I am on the TikToks. I don't have a Facebook account. I'm not that young and hip, but I'm on the TikToks. So, and Antonio, props to him for helping me get this going. Let's see, should I click on, do you want to get this going, Antonio? It's a short video, and I want you to scroll all the way halfway through it, because we don't need to spend that time watching all of it. I like The Office, the TV show The Office. I'm sorry, what?
Any problems?
There you go. Yeah, can you slide through half of this? Just skip through half of it, Antonio. There you go. Yeah, okay, we don't need to see all the crying. I don't want to upset anybody today. Angela, her house cat has passed away. And her coworker did not do a great job taking care of her cat while she was away. All right, can you skip through this a little bit more?
And there's the freezer.
There you go, there you go. All right, just leave it right there, leave it right there.
She cracked, she's gonna be fine. Oh, man.
Oh man, it's a little choppy, Antonio. That didn't happen earlier. Okay, well, I don't want to belabor this. Is the sound working for y'all? No, okay. So look, the deal is, so her cat passes away. Michael, who is the manager of the office, he's got like 10 people in this office. They're having a bad day, and he's feeling like the office is cursed, and people are dwelling over the fact that he accidentally hit one of his employees with his car. It's a funny show, take my word for it. But so he thinks Angela's upset about him hitting his employee with the car, and he's like, no, it's because her cat died. And Michael, the manager, says, Angela's cat? Sprinkles? And that's really it. What got my attention about that is that the manager knows his employee's cat's name. That's that involvement of leadership that Antonio, I think actually you were mentioning that you like that relationship, being able to connect with the leadership. That was a big deal for you, and that's such a part of the culture. That I think is so important. It's so important for leaders at all levels of an organization to really connect with people, and that helps to form a culture where people feel supported, and again, that sense of affiliation. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so a lot of the research that's looked at, and we've all heard of these expressions, toxic workplaces or dysfunctional workplaces or places that are just plain not fun to work in. The work itself might be okay, but the culture is not great. And there's been a lot of focus on remote work culture, a lot, especially since the pandemic. And how do we structure this when we're not all in the same room together, or in the same building, or in the same office space together? How do we do this? And so there's a lot of focus on this. There's a lot of research on how to create a structured remote work environment. And I don't think there's any one-size-fits-all solution to all of that. But the research that's looked at it in terms of what's not working, where there's a lack of a cohesive work culture, there's not good socialization. We don't get to see, because we're these culture agents and we want to see people, and we can't do that when you're sitting at home all day in front of your computer in your pajamas, and that's comfortable and all, but where's the culture? Where's the structured connection to each other with that? If you don't have that, if the leadership doesn't have real thought for that, that's a problem. And the number one finding that I saw when I reviewed the literature is loneliness, is workers reporting loneliness. The idea that they don't feel connected to other people, that there's not a real strong social culture. So, it's a little bit small on this slide. I'll read it for you. But again, leadership really needs to focus on this. It needs to be a series set of structured conversations between employees and leaders. There needs to be multiple channels of communication. So yeah, email, sure. But email is insufficient in many ways. And so having Microsoft Teams, the chatting function in Teams, a lot of IT companies are springing up with their own solutions to social communication, to connections in the remote work environment. Slack got out there before everyone else did, and really owned that space. They got bought out by Salesforce, by the way, and Salesforce has embedded Slack inside their own CRM, their own kind of database, worker database, to facilitate social communication. And there are a lot of other programs and platforms that are out there, and more are coming. I mean, this is going to be an emerging space in the IT sector of how to make the remote work environment, now that it's here to say, how do we make the remote work environment work on a social, cultural, organizational level? I don't think we're there yet, but there's a lot of solutions to the problems of remote work culture, and a lot of it comes down to leadership having multiple channels of communication, the Zoom or the WebEx or the Cisco or Teams, whatever, doing that a lot, trying to get together in person as much as you can. I think it's a combination, it's a blend to make the culture work. And again, it depends on the organization. Imagine trying to do Army basic training or a boot camp over Zoom or over Microsoft Teams. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're quite there yet. It's a true 100% remote work culture. It doesn't work in that sense. So we need to figure that out. But it's worthy of thinking about. Let me throw it out to y'all. Is there some practice that for those of you who've used to done a remote working environment, or you're currently doing a remote working environment, something that you thought was great, even though it was, you know, in terms of organization and culture, even though you were physically apart from each other? Is there something that you want to give a shout out to that you really like, or that you really makes you feel really connected culturally? We're back to a nice thing or a positive thing.
I'll toss one in, Guy. So when we were remote, we had several staff meetings, faculty meetings, and it was nice just to have some time before the meeting actually began where people could just talk. And a lot of it was really silly, and it was unusual for us to be at home. So there'd be kids in the background or pets walking across the screen. And people just sharing, especially during the pandemic when people were kind of nervous about what is going on. It was nice to have that human connection.
I love that. That's a perfect, Edward. Thank you for sharing that. And Tony, can we go on to the next slide to play off of what Edward was just mentioning? Yeah. So obviously, I like The Office. The show The Office, and humor is a big part, I guess, of my own leadership style. My unit is under some pressure, academically as well as financially, and so I just kind of laughing to make the tears go away. I just put in Slack or Teams just crazy jokes apropos of nothing. My folks know that I'm a sugar junkie, and so I really relate to Kevin, who's always complaining that there's people have gone to mini cupcakes. There used to be cupcakes. What happened to the real cakes? Where does it end with you people? So that idea of humor and comedy and just silliness, I think that's human nature, and that's important. And so folding that into a work culture is important, or is part of that. Let's move on to the next slide. We're almost done, y'all. I've mentioned this before. Surveys of people are really important to maintain organizational culture. And HR traditionally does that kind of job. Again, I've already kind of gone ballistic about the importance of organizational leadership to measure turnover, to measure staff losses. You never want to lose a superstar. You really need to have a soul-searching experience when you lose a superstar. By the way, one other thing, I mentioned comedy. Something else that my organization does. Some of you know that Campbell is a Christian university, and so we have a prayer group, like a prayer list in our Slack and in our Teams, where an employee will post, "Hey, my uncle's going in for surgery. Can you all think about him and pray for him?" And not everyone has to do it. It's not obligatory, but she'll put that out there, and people will, chat back or respond back with affirmations and that they're thinking about it. And I'll ask, what's this person's name, so I can include them in my prayers. It doesn't have to be comedy. What I'm saying is a lot of not necessarily work-focused activities that are part of our culture, though, can really help people feel connected to each other. All right, next slide. And here's some resources. Here's some links. The Buffer one does a survey every year of thousands of remote workers across the country. It's where I got what's kind of put me onto the lead for sleuthing about loneliness as a major factor. And there's a lot of research out there, a lot of articles, Washington Post business section. The Snack Nation, it looks like it's a silly website, but actually has a lot of great ideas and recommendations for IT and software and platforms to encourage and support an organizational culture that you really want to have with your buddies, with your coworkers, or with employees if you're in management. And last slides, last slide, Antonia, are there any final thoughts or questions or things that people want to share that hasn't come up before?
Dr. V, just kind of building on Dr. Fubara's point, yeah, I've attended a lot of training courses, and when you join, they have something called mystery networking. And when you get on there, if you say, yes, I want a mystery network, every 2 minutes, it teams you with another person who's on the call to allow you a 2-minute interaction, kind of introduce yourselves, and then it switches to another person, So it gives you an appreciation and a dedicated time to meet each of your classmates in between. And on breaks, they activate it as well. So if you want to continue to meet people during the break, you can do that. It's just a way to make the remote exercise more personal.
I love that. So that was with your work or with a different organization?
It's a current training that I'm going through. You get onto it.
So
and
they've co-opted speed. Yeah, they've co-opted speed dating and repurposed it for the workplace.
Exactly.
It's a platonic speed dating for this training program, this class. That's awesome. That's an awesome idea. I love that. Very cool. Any other thoughts or ideas or examples that folks want to share?
I got one more. So I'm stealing this from my wife. She's doing sales online, fully remote. She's never met her colleagues. She's never been to the office, never met the people that she works with. And but one of the things that they did back, you talked about goal setting earlier. She and one of her colleagues just decided on their own to set goals and kind of compete during the day for how many sales they could get. And, we all know that goal setting improves performance. So their sales went up and, it was a very friendly competition. And then their bosses paid attention to it and really commended them for doing that. And so it was something that, as you talked about, it was unwritten, informal, and, they were not in leadership, creating this idea. That just on their own did it. And it was really a win-win because they made more money, sold, more sales, and, got commended by their bosses.
And they're having fun. They're having fun and they're connecting to each other. And it's, that's an awesome corporate citizenship and going above and beyond all of that. That's awesome. Yeah, a little just kind of healthy, fun competition. From people working in factories or blue collar jobs or service workers, there's all sorts of ways that people can kind of be a little, and competitiveness is also an instinct. It's a trait in human nature. So you're kind of harnessing that, but in a fun way. That's a great example. I love that. And by the way, has your wife been winning or has it been her?
I think
Are you
she
not
is, actually?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think she is.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we'll give her congrats for me then. I'm sorry?
It's good for my budget. So
It's good for you too.
Yeah.
So you're kind of encouraged. So now you're encouraging your wife to be her friend. Okay. It's all coming together. I see. I love it.
One step closer to the Range Rover.
Great. Well, I mean, Antonio, how do you want to finish things up?
That's some great information. Thank you, Dr. G. Everybody, thank you for joining Leadership Live for October. 2 more left for the remaining of the year. Like I said, if you're missing one or have not completed one, just reach out to marketing and we can look up which one you're missing and send you that YouTube link to rewatch it. But thank you, guys. Thank you for the great information, great presentation. So thank you, y'all.
Good speaking with all of you. Thanks for participating.
Thank you.
Bye now.